The Archive of Shattered Glass. Chapter 1: The Weight of Dust and Silence. The air in the great archive of Athelgard hung thick with the scent of damp parchment, ancient leather, and the peculiar metallic tang of dormant magic. Dust motes danced in the narrow shafts of sunlight, struggling through high, grime-encrusted windows. Alara Vanya moved through the towering canyon of shelves, her worn boots whispering on the flagstones. She wasn't a scholar, not officially. She was a keeper of the quill, a glorified scribe and shelver, invisible to the robed magisters who drifted through the upper galleries like self-important ghosts. Her fingers, stained with ink, traced the embossed spines of forgotten treatises. On the Binding of Elemental Spirits, Volume 7, the Geometries of Temporal Flux. Catalog of Cursed Artifacts, Restricted Access! Alara felt the familiar frustrating prickle beneath her skin, the faint resonance of the magic bound within the texts. It was always there, a low hum just beyond her perception, like a song sung in a distant room. For her, it was a constant reminder of what she couldn't have. Alara was fractured. Born with the potential for magic, the awakening ceremony a decade ago hadn't ignited her inner spark. It had shattered it. Instead of channeling the ether, she resonated discordantly with it. Unfocused energy crackled around her when she was stressed, causing inkwells to spill inexplicably, parchment to crisp at the edges, or, memorably, causing an entire shelf of particularly arrogant Magister Thorn's theoretical works to spontaneously combust. It earned her the nickname Glasswitch and ensured her permanent exile to the deepest, dustiest stacks. Today, she was tasked with reshelving returns from the Restricted Annex, a section sealed behind heavy iron doors and wards that made her teeth ache. Most were dry historical accounts or dense magical theory. But one book felt different. It was unassuming, bound in plain, dark leather with no title. It hadn't been on the returns cart. She'd found it tucked haphazardly behind a crumbling atlas of the Void Realms, as if hastily hidden. Curiosity warred with caution. Handling unknown magical texts was dangerous, especially for her. But the book hummed with a different resonance. Not the sharp tang of destructive wards or the oily slickness of necromantic texts, but a deep melancholic thrum, like a forgotten bell tolling underwater. She glanced around. The aisle was deserted, swallowed by shadows and silence. Holding her breath, she opened it. Inside, the script was spidery, archaic, but legible. Not a spellbook, a journal. The opening line snagged her breath. They call it the gift. A lie. Magic is not given. It is taken. Paid for in the coin of memory. Siphoned from the soul's wellspring. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her fractured magic sparked uneasily in her fingertips. She turned a brittle page. The Mirror of Mnemosyne, not a scrying glass, but a conduit. A siphon. They use it. The Circle of Sapphiron, hidden within the archive's heart. They steal memories, not just knowledge, but moments, emotions, the essence of who we were, to fuel their power. Power that grows while the city forgets. A cold dread seeped into Alara's bones. The Circle of Sapphiron? She'd heard whispers, always dismissed as paranoid rumors. Magisters disappearing after questioning certain policies. Unexplained gaps in the city's historical records, the pervasive sense of unease that had settled over Athelgard like a shroud these past years. Could this be the source? She read on, faster, the words blurring. The author described a hidden chamber beneath the Starwell, the archive's central nexus, accessible only through a path woven from specific memories. The journal detailed the ritual, how the mirror consumed recollections, leaving victims hollow, adrift, slowly losing themselves. It named names: Magister Vorlag, head of acquisitions; Magister Thorn, keeper of arcane law; Archivist Prime Solara herself. Pillars of the scholarly community, architects of the city's magical defenses, thieves of souls. A sharp crackle of energy escaped Alara's control. The page beneath her fingers blackened at the corner. She slammed the book shut, her breath ragged. This wasn't just dangerous knowledge, it was a death sentence. If they found her with this... A heavy footstep echoed nearby. Magister Vorlag's unmistakable, ponderous tread. Panic seized her. She couldn't be caught here, holding this. With frantic haste, she shoved the journal back into the gap behind the atlas, her fingers trembling. She grabbed a random heavy tome, Taxonomies of Lesser Demons, and pretended to be engrossed as Vorlag rounded the corner. His small, pale eyes scanned the aisle, lingering on her for a fraction too long. Vorlag was a mountain of a man, his dark robes straining over his bulk, his face perpetually locked in an expression of sour disapproval. A faint, oily aura clung to him, the signature of his earth magic, but beneath it, Alara sensed something else now, a chilling emptiness, like a deep, dark well. "Keeper Vanya," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "You seem agitated. Found something interesting?" Alara forced her voice steady, clutching the demon taxonomy like a shield. "Just reshelving, Magister Vorlag. Some misplaced volumes from the annex, heavy reading." She gestured vaguely with the book. Vorlag's gaze swept the shelves, lingering near the atlas. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Suspicion? Knowledge? Indeed. Ensure they are returned to their correct places. Disorder is unacceptable. He paused, his eyes drilling into hers. "The archives hold secrets best left undisturbed, Keeper. Remember your place! Glass breaks easily." He lumbered past, the scent of damp earth and something vaguely rotten trailing behind him. Alara waited until his footsteps faded completely before sagging against the cold stone shelf, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. The journal's words echoed in her mind. Power that grows while the city forgets. The chilling implication settled over her. Her own fragmented magic was a curse, but this was monstrous. And Vorlag's warning wasn't just intimidation. It was a threat. A single drop of blood fell onto the cover of Taxonomies of Lesser Demons. Alara touched her nose. The nosebleed was back, a familiar consequence of stress straining her unstable connection to the ether. She wiped it away with a grimace, staring at the smear of crimson on the worn leather. Fear warred with a sudden, fierce determination. They called her Glass Witch. They thought her broken, harmless. But glass, when shattered, could be sharp, and someone had to remember what the Circle of Sapphiron was trying to make the world forget. The weight of the hidden journal's secret pressed down on her, heavier than any tome on these endless shelves. The silence of the Great Archive wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the silence of stolen voices, of memories devoured. Alara Vanya, the fractured scribe, knew she could no longer remain invisible. The path ahead was fraught with peril, likely ending in her own shattering, but the truth, she realized, was worth bleeding for. The archive's silence had been broken, and the echo demanded an answer. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Stacks and a Shadowed Ally. The days after discovering the journal blurred into a haze of paranoia and forced normalcy. Every creak of the ancient shelves sounded like Vorlag's approaching tread. Every robed magister seemed to watch her with unnerving intensity. Alara moved through her duties like an automaton, reshelving scrolls, mending bindings, but her mind churned relentlessly. The journal's revelations were a poison slowly spreading through her thoughts. She needed to learn more, but accessing the restricted annex again was impossible. Vorlag had subtly increased patrols near the iron doors, and the wards now vibrated with a sharper, more aggressive energy that made Alara's head throb if she lingered too close. The journal itself was a beacon of danger. Retrieving it was out of the question. She had to rely on her own knowledge of the archive, a map etched into her memory from years of navigating its labyrinthine depths. Her only lead was the Starwell, the vast circular chamber at the archive's heart. It was a nexus of ley lines, its floor inlaid with a complex, luminous mosaic depicting celestial constellations that subtly shifted with the ether's flow. Magisters gathered there for important ceremonies or intense study, drawing on the concentrated energy. According to the journal, the mirror's chamber lay beneath it. Alara volunteered for every task that took her near the Starwell. She delivered messages, replenished the ever-burning spectral lamps that hovered near its vaulted ceiling, swept the perimeter mosaics. Each visit was a study in suppressed terror. She scanned the intricate patterns on the floor, searching for any anomaly, any hint of a concealed entrance mentioned in the journal as being woven from memory. But the mosaic was flawless, a masterpiece of enchanted stone and light. She felt nothing but the overwhelming thrum of raw power, which agitated her fractured magic, making her palms sweat and her vision swim. One afternoon, while painstakingly dusting a bust of Archmage Lyra the Wise overlooking the Starwell, she overheard a snippet of conversation between Magisters Thorn and Solara. Thorn, gaunt and perpetually scowling, was arguing in a low, urgent hiss. "Too many gaps, Solara." Vorlag's latest acquisition was sloppy. The merchant remembered the price, remembered the journey, but forgot why he came to Athelgard entirely. It's becoming noticeable. Archivist Prime Solara, a woman whose serene demeanor and silver hair exuded timeless wisdom, merely smiled, a chillingly placid expression. Calm yourself, Magister Thorn. The city thrives on forgetfulness, small sacrifices for stability, for the power that shields us all. Gaps are filled with plausible narratives. Ensure Vorlage is more precise next time. The harvest approaches. We require potency. Alara's blood ran cold. Harvest, the journal had used that term. Acquisition. They were talking about people, merchants, citizens harvesting their memories. She fumbled the duster, sending a small plume of dust onto the bust's marble shoulders. Solara's sharp eyes flicked towards her. Keeper, is there a problem? Alara ducked her head, scrambling to retrieve the duster, her fractured magic sparking nervously, making the dust motes dance erratically. No, Archivist Prime. Apologies, clumsy. Solara's gaze lingered, cool and assessing. See that it doesn't happen again. Precision is paramount in preserving knowledge. The irony of the statement, delivered while discussing the obliteration of knowledge, was grotesque. Solara turned back to Thorn. Proceed as planned. The stability of Athelgard depends on our vigilance. Alara fled the Starwell, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The confirmation was terrifying! The highest authorities were complicit! She was utterly alone, a fragile glass figure amidst stone giants. That evening, seeking solace in the only place she felt marginally safe, Alara retreated to her tiny book-filled alcove deep in the astrology wing. Nestled amidst celestial charts and orreries, she tried to sketch the Starwell mosaic from memory, hoping to spot something she'd missed. Her hand trembled, lines going awry. Frustration welled up, and with it, the familiar, unwelcome surge of unstable energy. The quill in her hand grew hot, then the parchment beneath it began to smolder. She dropped it with a gasp, stamping out the tiny ember before it could catch. Trouble controlling the resonance? A quiet voice spoke from the shadows between two towering shelves. Alara jumped, whirling around. A figure detached itself from the gloom. He was tall, lean, dressed not in magister robes, but in practical dark leathers, reinforced with subtle, non-reflective metal plates at the joints. His hair was black and tied back, his face sharp-featured and weathered, dominated by intense gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. A long, slender blade hung at his hip, its hilt wrapped in worn leather. He moved with the silent grace of a predator. The description mirrored the journal's account of memory theft. Alara felt a pang of horrified empathy. The journal mentioned others. Kalen nodded grimly. I've been searching from the outside, tracked Vorlag's movements, his acquisitions, learned of the mirror, the harvest, but the archive's wards are impenetrable from without. I need someone on the inside, someone they underestimate. He gestured towards her still tingling fingers. Someone uniquely attuned. They call me Glasswitch, Alara said bitterly. I'm broken, dangerous to myself and others. What can I possibly do? You see the cracks they ignore, Kalen stated simply. You feel the dissonance they've learned to filter out. And you found the journal they missed. That makes you valuable. Dangerous to them. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The journal spoke of a path beneath the Starwell, woven from memory. I believe I know what that means. Alara stared at him, the weight of her isolation momentarily lifted, replaced by the terrifying burden of shared purpose. What? The Starwell mosaic, Kalen explained. It's not just decoration, it's a map keyed to specific, powerful memories stored within the archive's deepest vaults. The memory crystals. The path to the mirror chamber isn't physical. It's a sequence of memories projected onto the mosaic that opens a portal. Understanding dawned on Alara. That's why they steal memories, not just for power, but for keys. Specific, potent memories to unlock the path. Exactly, Kalen confirmed. And the journal you found likely belonged to someone who knew the sequence, or part of it. Someone who tried to expose them. Someone they silenced. The implications were staggering. Alara looked down at her hands, where unstable energy still flickered. But how do we find the sequence? How do we access the memory crystals? They're heavily guarded. We don't need the crystals themselves, Kalen said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. We need the resonance of the memories, the specific emotional and cognitive signature. And you, Alara Vanya, with your fractured sensitivity. You might just be able to feel it. If we can get you close enough to the Starwell when the pattern is active, or perhaps when they next open the path. Alara felt a surge of vertigo. It was madness. Suicide. Yet, the image of Kalen's stolen sister, the nameless victims Vorlog harvested, the cold calculation in Solara's eyes, they coalesced into a resolve harder than stone. Her broken magic wasn't just a curse. It was a weapon they didn't understand. Vorlog is planning another acquisition soon, she whispered, recalling his conversation with Solara. He mentioned needing potency for the harvest. Kalen's expression hardened. Then that's when they'll likely open the path. We need to be ready. He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small, smooth stone, dark gray and faintly warm. Take this, a communication stone. Focus your thoughts onto it. I'll hear. Use it only in direst need. I'll find ways to contact you. Trust no one. Alara took the stone, its warmth a strange comfort against her perpetually cool skin. Trust no one. In the den of memory thieves, it was the only sensible advice. As Kalen melted back into the shadows of the stacks, Alara clutched the stone. She was no longer just the glass witch, the broken scribe. She was a spark in the archive's suffocating darkness. And sparks, however fragile, could start fires. The hunt for the Mirror of Nemesis had begun. Chapter 3. The Resonance of Stolen Moments. The communication stone became a secret weight in Alara's pocket, a constant reminder of the fragile alliance and the looming danger. Kalen was a ghost within the archive. She'd glimpse him sometimes, a shadow detaching itself from deeper darkness near the ancient linguistics section, a flicker of movement high in the runic script gallery, always gone before she could be certain. He left subtle signs. A specific astronomy text left open on a desk near her alcove, marking a time to listen on the stone. A small, charred mark on a flagstone near a disused stairwell, signaling a dead end in his reconnaissance. Their communication was sparse, conducted through focused whispers into the warm stone during stolen moments in empty corridors or her alcove. Vorlog met a caravan master near the west gate, looked tense. Expect his acquisition soon. Kalen's voice, thin and distant in her mind, relayed the information 3 days after their meeting. Alara's palms grew slick with sweat. The west gate catered to traders from the Silverbark Forest, hardy folk, known for their strong communal memories and oral histories. Potent fuel indeed. She increased her vigilance near the Starwell, volunteering for any duty that kept her within earshot of Vorlag or Thorn. The air crackled with a tension only she seemed to perceive, a dissonant hum beneath the archive's usual quiet. 2 nights later the summons came, not through official channels, but via a curt mental pulse through the stone that jolted Alara awake in her narrow cot. Movement. Starwell. Now. Cloak yourself. Her heart leapt into her throat. She threw on her simple keeper's tunic and trousers, grabbing her darkest, most nondescript cloak. The stone felt like a burning coal in her hand, moving like a wraith. She navigated the familiar back routes, servant passages, disused maintenance corridors thick with cobwebs, stairwells spiraling deep into the archive's stone bones. The wards guarding the main approaches to the Starwell pulsed with increased vigilance, a low thrum that vibrated in her molars. She avoided them, slipping through a forgotten ventilation shaft Kalen had mentioned, emerging into a narrow observation balcony high above the Starwell floor. Shrouded in perpetual gloom. Kalen was already there, a deeper shadow against the darkness, his gray eyes fixed intently below. The vast chamber was dimly lit, the hovering spectral lamps casting long, dancing shadows. Vorlog stood near the center, his bulk imposing. Beside him was a man Alara didn't recognize, lean, dressed in travel-stained leathers, his face pale and drawn, eyes wide with confusion and dawning terror. A caravan master, no doubt. Opposite them stood Archivist Prime Solara, her silver hair catching the faint light, her expression serene as ever. Magister Thorn stood slightly behind her, clutching a heavy lead-lined box. "Welcome, Master Tellen." Solara's voice echoed softly, unnervingly calm. "Your contribution to the preservation of Athelgard's stability is noted and appreciated." I don't understand," Tellen stammered, backing away a step. "You said you required information on Silverbark trade routes." "And we do," Vorlog rumbled, stepping forward. His hand shot out, not to strike, but to clamp onto Tellen's shoulder. The caravan master gasped, his body locking rigid. Vorlag's oily earth magic flared, not aggressively, but as an anchor, holding Tellen immobile. But the most valuable information is often experiential. Your memories of the forest, your people's stories, their potency will serve the city far better than mere maps. Thorn opened the box. Nestled within dark velvet lay not a weapon, but an object of terrifying beauty, the Mirror of Mnemosyne. It was a disk of flawless, depthless obsidian, larger than a serving platter, held within a frame of intricately woven silver that pulsed with a sickly violet light. It didn't reflect the dim chamber. Instead, it seemed to swallow the light, showing only swirling, formless shadows within its surface. Solara raised her hands. Power, cold and immense, gathered around her, making the very air in the balcony hum and Alara's fractured magic writhe in sympathetic agony. She bit her lip hard, tasting blood, forcing herself to stay silent, to watch. Solara began to chant, syllables harsh and guttural, utterly unlike the scholarly tones she used in public. The silver frame of the mirror glowed brighter, the violet light intensifying, casting grotesque shadows on the chamber walls. Vorlog forced Tellen to look directly into the obsidian surface. The caravan master's eyes widened further, filled not with sight, but with a horrifying internal vision. He screamed, a raw sound of utter despair that echoed in the vast space. "Now, Alara!" Kaelin's mental voice was a whip crack in her mind. "Focus on the mosaic! Feel the resonance!" Below, as Tellen screamed, the mirror pulsed. Beams of violet light lanced out from its frame, striking specific points on the intricate Starwell mosaic. Where the light hit, the enchanted stones flared, not with their usual soft celestial glow, but with stolen snapshots of life. The dappled sunlight through ancient silverbark leaves, the warmth of a communal hearth, the proud face of an elder telling stories, the sharp scent of pine resin, the crushing weight of grief at a graveside. They were Tellen's memories, ripped raw and bleeding from his mind, projected onto the floor. Alara closed her eyes, not to block out the horror, but to focus inward. She reached out with her fractured senses, not towards the overwhelming power of the ritual, but towards the mosaic itself. She pushed past the cold void emanating from the mirror, past the crushing weight of Solara's magic, past Vorlog's anchoring earth force. She sought the echoes left behind on the stones where the violet light had struck. Each activated point on the mosaic resonated with the stolen memory it had just displayed. The resonance wasn't the memory itself, but its unique emotional and cognitive signature, the feeling of dappled sunlight, the essence of the elder's pride, the ache of the graveside grief. It was chaotic, agonizing. The stolen joy was tainted with terror. The profound grief was magnified by violation. Alara's own unstable magic recoiled, threatened to spiral out of control. Blood trickled steadily from her nose now, warm and metallic. She gripped the stone balcony ledge, knuckles white. "Feel it!" Kaelin urged, his presence a steady anchor beside her. The pattern, the sequence. She forced her awareness deeper, filtering out the horror, seeking the underlying resonance of each activated point. One flared with the vibrant, chaotic energy of communal celebration. Another pulsed with the deep, steady rhythm of ancestral knowledge. A third vibrated with the sharp, sweet, sad pang of first love. A fourth thrummed with the weary resilience of generations. A fifth resonated with the profound, silent grief of loss. 5 points, 5 stolen keys. Alara imprinted the sensations onto her own mind. Not the images, but the feeling of each resonance, its unique frequency within the cacophony of stolen life. It was like memorizing the taste of different poisons. The sequence burned itself into her awareness. Celebration, knowledge, love, resilience, grief. Below, Tellen's screams had subsided into ragged whimpers. He slumped in Vorlog's grip, eyes vacant, drool tracing a path down his chin. The light from the mirror faded. The projected memories on the mosaic winked out. Where the violet beams had struck, the stones now glowed with a faint residual afterimage of the stolen light. Solara lowered her hands. "Sufficient. Store him with the others. He may yet yield more mundane information." Her voice held no pity, only clinical assessment. Vorlag hauled the unresisting Tellen away like a sack of grain. Thorn carefully closed the lead box around the now dormant mirror. Solara gazed down at the mosaic, where the 5 faintly glowing points formed a distinct, asymmetrical pattern. The key they had just used. Alara slumped back against the cold stone wall of the balcony, trembling violently. Blood soaked the front of her tunic. The stolen resonances echoed in her mind, a symphony of violation. She had the sequence. She knew the path. But the cost of that knowledge, etched in the vacant horror of Talon's eyes and the coppery taste in her own mouth, was almost too much to bear. Kaelin's hand gripped her shoulder, silent, firm. They had their key. Now they needed a way to use it before the harvest consumed Athelgard whole. Chapter 4. The Price of Remembering. The days following the ritual were a blur of nausea and heightened paranoia. The stolen resonances, celebration, knowledge, love, resilience, grief, echoed incessantly in Alara's mind, a discordant chorus that disrupted her sleep and frayed her nerves. Her fractured magic, agitated by the proximity to the mirror and the influx of foreign emotional energy, became even more volatile. Inkwells shattered if she glanced at them wrong. Parchment spontaneously ignited if her frustration spiked. A near-disastrous incident involving a precariously stacked pile of rare bestiaries earned her a stern reprimand from a junior magister and suspicious glances from the other keepers. The nickname Glasswitch was whispered with renewed venom. Kaelin remained a phantom presence. His messages via the stone were brief, logistical. Wards strengthened around Starwell post-ritual. Patrols doubled. Solara departed for the Council Spire. Return expected in 2 days. Our window. Thorn reviewing security protocols in restricted annex. Distraction possible. The plan, formed in hushed mental exchanges during Alara's brief respites, was terrifyingly simple and fraught with peril. They needed to replicate the ritual sequence on the Starwell mosaic to open the path to the mirror chamber. But they lacked the mirror itself, and more importantly, the stolen memories to power the keys. Alara's role was twofold. First, to project the resonances of the sequence using her own unstable magic, mimicking the signature of the stolen memories. Second, to somehow bypass or overload the wards guarding the path once it was open. It's impossible, Alara had argued mentally, her fear a palpable tremor through the stone. My magic is chaos! I can't control it to project specific resonances. And the wards. Vorlog's earth magic anchors them. Thorn's arcane law shapes them. They'll shred me. Your magic is attuned to dissonance, Kaelin countered, his mental voice grimly resolute. That's precisely why it might work. You don't need to perfectly mimic the stolen joy or grief. You need to project the essence of those resonances, the raw emotional frequency, through your own fractured lens. The dissonance might be the key to disrupting their carefully tuned wards. As for control, he paused. You channel it when you work, when you focus on preservation. Find that focus. Focus on why you're doing this. Focus on Lyra, on Talon, on stopping them. His words offered cold comfort, but no alternative. Solara's absence was their best, likely only chance. The night arrived, thick with tension. The archive was quieter than usual, the silence feeling watchful. Alara moved like a ghost, avoiding the main corridors, using the hidden ways Kaelin had revealed. She carried nothing but the warm communication stone and a desperate, clawing fear. Kaelin was waiting in the shadowed observation balcony, his form tense. Below, the Starwell was dimly lit, deserted. The mosaic pulsed with its usual soft celestial light. The faint violet afterglow of Talon's stolen memories completely faded. Ready? His mental question was taut as a bowstring. Alara took a deep, shuddering breath. She closed her eyes, reaching inward. Not for control, that was a mirage, but for focus. She pictured Lyra's face, imagined from Kaelin's descriptions, bright, curious, silenced. She saw Talon's vacant stare. She felt the cold calculation in Solara's eyes, the greedy hunger in Vorlag's, anger cold and sharp, cut through her fear. For them, for all the stolen voices. She opened her eyes, stepping to the edge of the balcony. Below, the mosaic stretched out, vast and complex. She focused on the first point in the sequence, the one that had resonated with stolen celebration. She didn't try to conjure joy. She channeled the fierce, defiant anger burning within her, shaped it by the memory of the resonance she'd felt. She pushed it outwards, not as a controlled beam, but as a wave of discordant energy from her fractured core. Unstable magic, raw and crackling, erupted from her fingertips. It wasn't the precise violet beam of the mirror. It was a jagged lance of white-hot energy, spitting sparks, lancing erratically downwards. It struck the mosaic stone not with focused activation, but with a violent splash of light and sound. The stone flared erratically, not with the stolen image of Silverbark celebration, but with a chaotic burst of light that flickered like a dying firework. The resonance! Feel it! Shape the energy! Kaylin urged, his voice strained in her mind. Gritting her teeth, Alara ignored the wild flare of light. She focused solely on the feeling she was trying to project. The defiant anger standing in for stolen joy. She poured her will into it, forcing the chaotic energy to carry that specific emotional signature. The erratic flare on the mosaic stone steadied slightly, pulsing with a harsh, discordant rhythm that nonetheless vibrated with a crude approximation of the celebration resonance. A low chime sounded from deep within the floor. 1 down, 4 to go. Alara was already trembling, a fresh trickle of blood warm on her upper lip. The effort of shaping the wild energy was like trying to herd lightning. The next point, knowledge. She focused on the burning need to know the truth, to expose the circle. Her magic lashed out again, another jagged bolt. This time, the chaos carried a sharper edge, an insistent, demanding pulse. It struck the second stone. The flare was less erratic, pulsing with a harsh blue-white light that hummed with the resonance of desperate inquiry. Another chime. Love. This was harder. What love did she have to draw on? Isolation was her constant companion. Then she thought of Kaylin, risking everything for his sister, of the quiet solidarity of the other keepers, unaware of the rod above them. She channeled a fierce protective surge, not romantic love, but the stubborn refusal to let more light be extinguished. Her magic responded, a wave of shimmering, unstable energy that washed over the third point. It flared with a warm, golden light, shot through with painful cracks of instability, resonating with protective fury. A third chime, deeper this time. Resilience. She drew on her own life, the constant struggle with her magic, the scorn endured, the determination to survive. She poured that weary, stubborn strength into the projection. Her magic surged, not violently, but with a thick amber wave that slammed into the fourth point. The stone flared with a steady, enduring glow, though fissures of unstable energy spiderwebbed across its surface. The chime was strong and clear. Grief, the easiest and hardest. She thought of Talon's stolen life, of Lyra's hollow fate, of all the forgotten souls. A wave of profound, aching sorrow washed over her. Her magic, already strained to its limit, erupted not as a beam, but as a dark, weeping cascade of energy that engulfed the fifth point. The stone flared with a deep, bruised purple light, throbbing with raw, dissonant pain. A final, mournful chime resonated through the chamber. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The 5 points pulsed erratically with Alara's unstable projections, casting jagged, conflicting shadows. Then, with a grinding sound of ancient stone, the center of the Starwell mosaic shifted. A large circular section sank down about a foot, then slid aside with surprising silence, revealing a dark, perfectly circular shaft, descending into impenetrable blackness. A faint, cold draft sighed upwards, carrying the scent of ozone and something else, the chilling emptiness of the mirror itself. The path was open. But Alara was spent. She sagged against the balcony railing, vision swimming, blood dripping freely from her nose, staining the stone below. Her magic crackled weakly around her, a dying fire. The effort of projecting the resonances had drained her, leaving her feeling hollowed out, brittle. Alara! The wards. Kaylin's mental shout was urgent. She looked down. The opening was there, but the air around it shimmered with barely visible energy. Vorlog's anchoring earth wards. Thorn's razor-sharp arcane barriers. They hadn't been disabled by the opening. They were the guards at the gate. Kaylin was already moving, leaping from the balcony with preternatural grace, landing in a crouch near the opening. He drew his slender blade, its edge gleaming faintly in the chaotic light. I'll draw their focus. You need to disrupt the wards. Your dissonance. Push it into them. Alara stared at the shimmering barrier. It looked solid, deadly. Pushing her chaotic magic into that was like throwing glass at a grinding wheel. But Kaylin was already stepping towards the opening, his blade held low. As he approached the shimmering air, the wards reacted. Tendrils of earth magic, like grasping roots made of solidified force, erupted from the floor, aiming to ensnare him. Simultaneously, arcs of blue-white energy, sharp as razors, sliced through the air towards him. Kalen moved like liquid shadow, his blade a blur, deflecting the arcane razors with sparks, dodging the earthen roots. He was impossibly fast, but it was a defensive dance. He couldn't advance. "Now, Alara!" Gathering the dregs of her strength, fueled by desperation and the sight of Kalen fighting for his life against the very defenses she had to breach, Alara focused on the wards. Not to understand them, not to dismantle them with skill she didn't possess, but to attack them with the only weapon she had, the raw, grating dissonance of her fractured magic. She shoved her hands forward, palms out towards the shimmering barrier. She didn't try to shape the energy, she unleashed it. A torrent of chaotic, unstable power carrying the painful echoes of the resonances she'd just projected. The defiance, the desperate need, the protective fury, the weary strength, the crushing grief roared out of her. It wasn't a beam, it was a storm front of discordant energy. It slammed into the layered wards. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The shimmering barrier didn't absorb or deflect the chaotic wave. It convulsed. Vorlag's earthen roots writhed like wounded serpents, their solid forms flickering in and out of existence. Thorn's arcane razors sparked and fizzled, their precise angles twisting into chaotic spirals. The wards screamed, a high-pitched, metallic shriek that vibrated in the bones. The conflicting energies tore at each other. Kalen saw his chance. As the wards buckled and spasmed under the onslaught of Alara's dissonance, he darted forward, a shadow slipping through a momentarily frayed section of the barrier. He vanished into the dark shaft. Alara collapsed to her knees on the balcony, utterly drained. The chaotic storm from her hands sputtered and died. The wards, though damaged and flickering erratically, began to reform, knitting the tears in their fabric. They hadn't fallen, they were wounded, angry, and very much active. And she was alone, exposed, her magic spent, the evidence of her transgression pulsing erratically on the mosaic below. The sound of running footsteps echoed from a nearby corridor. The patrols had heard the wards scream. She had to move. Now. Scrambling back into the ventilation shaft, leaving a trail of blood on the stone, Alara fled into the suffocating darkness. Kalen was inside. Her part was done. Now she could only hope he found the mirror and survived whatever guarded it before the circle descended upon them both. Chapter 5. Reflections in the Abyss. Kalen plunged into absolute darkness. The air in the shaft was frigid and still, smelling of deep earth and that pervasive, chilling emptiness that clung to the mirror. He landed silently on a smooth stone floor far below, his senses straining. The shaft above was a circle of faint, chaotic light from the damaged Starwell mosaic, already shrinking as the displaced stone slab began to grind back into place. The wards above shrieked their protest, a fading wail. Silence slammed down, thick and heavy. He ignited a small shielded witchlight, not magical but alchemical, its cool green glow revealing a circular chamber. The walls were seamless, polished black stone that drank the light. The only feature was the mirror of Mnemosyne. It stood on a simple obsidian plinth in the exact center. In this confined space, its presence was overwhelming. The flawless obsidian surface wasn't just dark. It was an absence, a hole punched through reality. The intricate silver frame pulsed with that same sickly violet light, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. The sense of emptiness emanating from it was a physical pressure, a vacuum pulling at his thoughts, his sense of self. He understood why Tellen had screamed. Looking directly at it felt like staring into the maw of oblivion. He tore his gaze away, scanning the chamber. No guards? That seemed unlikely. Solara wouldn't leave her prize unprotected. His eyes, adjusted to the gloom, picked out subtle patterns etched into the floor around the plinth. Containment wards, far more complex and potent than those above. They hummed with dormant power. Disturb the mirror, and they would activate, violently. His objective was clear: destroy the mirror. But how? Smashing it seemed too simple and likely shielded. The journal had spoken of it as a conduit, a siphon. He needed to disrupt its function, sever its connection. His eyes fell on the silver frame. It pulsed rhythmically, like a diseased heart. The power source? The containment field for the stolen memories? He approached cautiously, every sense screaming danger. The closer he got, the stronger the pull of the void became. Whispers seemed to flutter at the edge of his hearing. Not voices, but fragments of feeling. Echoes of stolen lives, a child's fleeting joy, a scholar's moment of insight, crushing despair. They brushed against his mind like cold cobwebs. He reached the edge of the etched ward circle. The air crackled with potential energy. One wrong step. He studied the frame. The silver wasn't just decorative, it was covered in minuscule, impossibly complex runes, glowing faintly with the violet light. He recognized some. Binding sigils, soul anchors, dimensional stabilizers. This was no mere ornament. It was the engine, the control mechanism. Destroying the frame might destabilize the mirror itself. He drew his blade. It was enchanted steel, capable of disrupting magical flows. A precise strike. He focused, gathering his strength, aiming for a junction point in the runic lattice near the base of the frame. A voice, cold and resonant, filled the chamber, seeming to come from the very stones. "Cease, intruder!" Kalen froze, blade poised. From the seamless wall opposite the shaft, a section shimmered and dissolved. Archivist Prime Solara stepped through, her silver hair and serene face illuminated by the mirror's violet glow. She hadn't left the city. It had been a ruse. Her eyes, usually calm pools of wisdom, now held a glacial, predatory light. Power radiated from her, the same immense cold force he'd felt during the ritual, but amplified here, in the heart of her domain. "You have shown remarkable tenacity!" "Kalen," Solara said, her voice echoing slightly. "And resourcefulness, recruiting the fractured keeper. A flawed tool, but effective enough to breach our outer defenses." Briefly, she glanced dismissively at the closed shaft above. Her dissonance was unexpected, crude, but potent in its chaos. Vorlag is dealing with the aftermath. Kalen's blood ran cold. Vorlag was above. With Alara, he shifted his stance, blade ready, his gaze never leaving Solara. "Where is my sister?" Solara smiled, a chilling expression devoid of warmth. "Lyra?" Her curiosity was inconvenient, but her potential was significant. "She serves Ethelgard now, in a far more profound way than mere scholarship." She gestured towards the mirror. Her memories were particularly potent. The resilience of youth, the fierce spark of intellect, they fuel the wards that protect this city even now. Rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through Kalen. "You stole her! You stole her life!" "We preserved her essence," Solara corrected calmly. "Scattered, perhaps, but contributing to the greater good." "Stability requires sacrifice, Kalen. Your sister understood that in the end. Before the mirror took her understanding, of course." She took a step forward. "Now, you present a dilemma. Your skills are considerable. Your memories, particularly your bond with Lyra and your knowledge of the city's underbelly, they could be valuable additions to our reservoir. A potent key for future paths." Kalen didn't hesitate. He lunged, not at Solara, but at the mirror's frame. His blade flashed in the green witchlight, aiming for the runic junction. Solara didn't move. She raised a hand. The etched wards on the floor flared with blinding violet light. Tendrils of pure force, colder than ice and sharper than his blade, lashed out, not to block, but to ensnare. They wrapped around his wrist, his ankle, yanking him off balance mid-lunge. He crashed to the stone floor, the breath knocked out of him. His blade skittered away. "You are predictable," Solara sighed, stepping closer. "Driven by emotion, a weakness the circle long ago transcended." She stood over him, gazing down with detached interest. "The bond you share with Lyra, it is strong. I can feel its resonance even now. That connection makes you vulnerable. It makes you accessible." She raised both hands towards the mirror. The obsidian surface rippled like dark water. The whispers intensified, coalescing. Within the depths, fragmented images flickered. A young girl laughing, Lyra, years ago. A shared secret smile, the crushing weight of loss when the connection snapped. Solara was pulling his memories, his bond with his sister, using it as a weapon against him. Agony lanced through Kalen's mind. It wasn't just the pain of recollection. It was the violation, the feeling of his deepest connection being ripped open and examined by Solara's cold intellect. He fought, throwing up mental barriers forged through years of hardship, but Solara's power was immense, amplified by the chamber and the mirror itself. The violet light from the frame intensified, bathing him, pulling at his consciousness. "Alara!" He screamed the name mentally. A desperate, final hope. Not knowing if the stone could penetrate this deep, not knowing if she could even hear him through the void and the wards. Above, in the suffocating darkness of the ventilation shaft, Alara pressed herself against the cold stone. The sounds of pursuit had faded. She'd lost them in the maze of passages. She was weak, trembling, the coppery taste of blood strong in her mouth. She clutched the communication stone, its warmth a feeble comfort. Then it burned. Not with Kalen's voice, but with a wave of pure psychic agony. Loss, violation, desperate rage. It was Kalen's essence screaming through the bond of the stone, and beneath it she felt the crushing, icy power of Solara and the sucking void of the mirror. He was down there. He was losing. Solara was taking him, using his love for his sister against him. The image of Tellen's vacant eyes flashed before her. Lyra's stolen life. Kalen's bond being torn apart. Her own fractured magic, drained and aching, recoiled at the onslaught of feeling. But then, something shifted. The resonances she had imprinted, celebration, knowledge, love, resilience, grief, were still echoes in her mind. Solara's cold power, Kalen's desperate love, the mirror's void. They clashed violently within her perception. It wasn't just dissonance, it was a catastrophic collision of forces. And she was the crucible. Her magic, attuned to discord, didn't shy away. It resonated with the chaos below. It flared within her, not as something she controlled, but as a sympathetic vibration, a tuning fork struck by the cacophony in the chamber. Power, raw and terrifying, surged through her exhausted body. Not her own, but an echo of the titanic struggle below, amplified and distorted by her unique fracture. It was too much. It would destroy her. But Kalen was being unmade. The mirror would keep stealing. Solara would win. With a gasp that was half sob, half battle cry, Alara didn't try to contain it. She didn't try to shape it. She focused every ounce of her will, her anger, her grief, her fierce protective love for the stolen lives and the brother fighting below. And she pushed the surging, chaotic energy down through the stone shaft, towards the chamber, towards the epicenter of the storm. Not as a weapon, but as pure, unfiltered dissonance. Below, Solara was forcing Kalen's gaze towards the mirror. The obsidian surface swirled, trying to latch onto his consciousness, to siphon his memories through the conduit of his bond with Lyra. Suddenly the chamber shuddered. Not physically, but magically. A wave of raw, grating energy, carrying the painful echoes of Silverbark memories, Alara's defiance, Kalen's rage, and the shrieking instability of her own fracture, slammed down the shaft and burst into the chamber. It hit the carefully balanced magical matrix like a hammer blow. The mirror's frame flared violently, the violet light stuttering, going chaotic. The containment wards on the floor flickered and spasmed, their precise patterns disrupted. Solara staggered, her concentration shattered. The relentless pull on Kalen's mind vanished. He gasped, free from the psychic assault. He saw Solara momentarily off balance, her serene mask cracked by surprise and fury. He saw the mirror, its frame sparking erratically, the obsidian surface churning like a storm-tossed sea. And he saw his blade gleaming on the floor just inches away. Solara recovered fast, her eyes blazing with cold fury. "Insignificant fracture!" she hissed, raising her hands. Power coalescing to crush the disruption and finish Kalen. But Kalen was faster. He rolled, grabbed his blade, and with every ounce of strength fueled by rage, grief, and Alara's desperate gift, he lunged. Not at Solara. At the sparking, vulnerable junction on the mirror's silver frame. The enchanted steel struck true. Chapter 6, The Shattering. Kalen's blade struck the intricate lattice of runes where the silver frame met the obsidian disc. It wasn't a mighty blow, but it was precise, driven by desperation and honed skill. The enchanted steel bit deep into the glowing silver, severing critical connections within the impossibly complex runic array. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the mirror screamed. Not a sound, but a silent, psychic shriek that tore through Kalen's mind. A backlash of pure, violated power. The violet light in the frame exploded outwards in a chaotic starburst, blinding him. The obsidian surface didn't crack. It rippled, reality itself seeming to warp around it. The sucking void pulsed violently, then inverted. Instead of pulling memories in, it began to expel them. Fragmented images, emotions, sensations erupted from the mirror in a chaotic torrent. A child's birthday laughter, suddenly cut off by terror. The blinding flash of a magical breakthrough, instantly replaced by confusion. The taste of a first kiss, dissolving into ash. The crushing weight of grief, raw and unadulterated. The fierce pride of a craftsman, fading into emptiness. Lyra's determined face as she deciphered an ancient text, dissolving into the vacant stare Solara had left behind. The stolen memories, no longer contained, no longer siphoned for power, flooded the chamber. It was a psychic tsunami, a cacophony of stolen lives crashing over Kaelin and Solara. Kaelin was thrown backwards by the physical force of the eruption, slamming into the black wall. He clutched his head, overwhelmed. Fragments of other people's lives, joys, sorrows, triumphs, despairs, hammered into his consciousness. He saw glimpses of Talon's life in the Silverbark, felt Lyra's final moments of terror and confusion as the mirror took her. It was agonizing, a violation in reverse. Solara fared worse. The psychic flood wasn't just random, it carried the emotional signatures of the memories she had personally harvested, the lives she had coldly dissected. The detached Archivist Prime was engulfed by the raw, unfiltered agony, terror, and despair she had inflicted. Her serene mask shattered completely. A raw scream, torn from her throat, echoed in the chamber, a sound of utter, unexpected torment. She stumbled, clutching her head, her eyes wide with a horror she had never allowed herself to feel. The mirror itself was breaking apart. Without the frame's control, the unstable obsidian disc couldn't contain the released energies. Hairline fractures, glowing with chaotic violet and white light, spiderwebbed across its surface. The void within churned violently, spitting out more fragmented memories like shrapnel. Kaelin forced himself to move, pushing through the psychic onslaught. His goal wasn't Solara, not yet. It was the dying mirror. If it exploded fully, the release of bound energy and stolen memories could be catastrophic, potentially vaporizing the chamber and everything above. He needed to contain it or redirect it. He scrambled towards his fallen witchlight. The etched wards on the floor were flickering erratically, damaged by Alara's dissonance and the mirror's death throes. He spotted a cluster of control runes near the base of the plinth, likely the primary containment matrix. Above, Alara felt the second wave through the stone. Not agony this time, but a terrifying release, a chaotic eruption of power and memory. The stone grew hot in her hand, vibrating violently. She sensed the mirror's instability, the catastrophic potential. Her own magic, still resonating sympathetically with the chaos below, flared in response. She was the crucible. She was still connected. Kaelin reached the control runes. They were complex, alien, designed for the mirror's specific function. He wasn't a master wardsmith, but he understood violence to mechanisms. He reversed his grip on his blade and slammed the pommel down onto the central nexus of the rune cluster. Stone shattered. Energy flared blue-white and died. The containment wards on the floor winked out completely. The mirror pulsed once violently. The fractures widened, glowing blindingly bright. The expelled memories intensified into a howling gale of psychic energy. Then, with a sound like a universe sighing, the obsidian disc didn't explode. It unraveled. The solid matter dissolved into shimmering dark mist. The silver frame crumpled like paper, then disintegrated into glowing violet ash. The stolen memories trapped within surged outwards in one final, overwhelming wave, not just fragments, but near-complete streams of consciousness, before dissipating like smoke in the suddenly still air. The psychic storm ceased as abruptly as it began. The oppressive void was gone, replaced by a profound ringing silence. The only light came from Kaelin's fallen witchlight, casting long, trembling shadows. Dust motes, stirred by the release, danced in its beam. Kaelin slumped against the plinth, gasping, his mind reeling from the psychic onslaught. He felt raw, scoured clean. Glimpses of stolen lives faded like bad dreams. Across the chamber, Solara lay curled on the floor, unmoving. Her eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling. But they held nothing. Not serenity, not fury, not even the horror of moments before. Just vacancy. The backlash of the released memories, the severing of the power she had drawn from the mirror for so long, had hollowed her out. She wasn't dead. She was empty, a vessel drained. The mirror of Mnemosyne was gone. Only a faint, dark smudge on the obsidian plinth and a sprinkling of violet ash remained. The chamber felt lighter, the air less frigid, though the scent of ozone lingered. Kaelin pushed himself up, wincing. His limbs felt heavy, his mind bruised. He looked at Solara's vacant form, no trace of triumph in him, only a deep, weary sorrow. He retrieved his witchlight and his blade. The shaft above remained closed. He needed to find Alara. He approached the section of wall Solara had used. Placing his hands on the smooth stone, he searched for the hidden mechanism, his senses still buzzing. There had to be a way out that didn't involve the warded shaft. Above, in the ventilation shaft, Alara felt the connection through the stone snap. The chaotic resonance vanished, replaced by a hollow silence. The stone cooled in her hand. She didn't know if Kalen was alive, if Solara was dead, if the mirror was destroyed. Exhaustion, deeper than any she had ever known, crashed over her. The effort of channeling that final wave of dissonance had pushed her fractured magic and her body beyond its limits. Her vision darkened at the edges. The last thing she felt was the cold stone against her cheek as she slumped unconscious in the dark passage, the communication stone still clutched loosely in her blood-stained hand. The silence of the archive, no longer suffocating but profoundly changed, settled around her like a shroud. Chapter 7. Echoes in the silence. The silence that followed the mirror's destruction wasn't the watchful quiet of before, nor the suffocating emptiness it had imposed. It was the stunned silence after an explosion, a quiet thick with settling dust, and the echoes of vanished thunder. Kalen found the hidden release for the wall panel, a subtle depression disguised within the polished stone. It slid open silently, revealing a narrow, ascending staircase carved from the bedrock. He emerged not into the stairwell, but into a disused sub-basement storage room filled with decaying furniture and shrouded statues. The sounds of commotion, raised voices, running footsteps, echoed faintly from above. Vorlog and the guards were occupied topside. He moved like a shadow, navigating the lower service levels with the ease of long reconnaissance. His priority was Alara. He focused on the faint, residual warmth of the communication stone, a beacon only he could perceive. It led him to the ventilation shaft entrance near the astrology wing balcony. He found her curled unconscious in the darkness, pale, blood drying on her face and tunic, breathing shallowly. The stone was still clutched in her hand. Relief warred with concern. She was alive, but the cost was written on her fragile form. He checked her pulse, weak but steady. Gathering her carefully, he lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her silently through the labyrinth, avoiding patrols, heading not to her alcove, too obvious, but to the one place he knew was overlooked. The deepest sublevel of the restricted annex storage, a cavernous space rarely visited, filled with crates deemed too dangerous or too obscure for regular shelves. He laid her on a bed of discarded packing cloths behind a stack of crates containing petrified void spore samples. The air was cold and stale, but safe. He cleaned the blood from her face as best he could with a damp corner of cloth, then covered her with his own cloak. She didn't stir. Leaving her hidden, Kalen ghosted back towards the upper levels. He needed to gauge the aftermath. The atmosphere in the main corridors was tense. Magisters huddled in worried clusters, their usual arrogance replaced by confusion and fear. Whispers flew. Felt the wards scream. Starwell mosaic. Damaged. Chaotic energy burns. Archivist Prime. Missing. Vorlag found near the shaft. Unconscious. Mumbling about shattering glass and screaming memories. Thorn sealed the Starwell completely. No one in or out. The circle of Sapphiron was in disarray. Vorlag was incapacitated, likely suffering a psychic backlash similar to Solara's, though perhaps less severe. Thorn was scrambling, trying to contain the situation, seal the breach, and maintain the illusion of control. Solara was gone. Vanished. Kalen knew where, a hollow shell in the chamber below. The mirror was destroyed. Their source of power and their method of control were gone. He returned to Alara as dawn's gray light began to filter through high, dirty windows far above. She was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed stronger. He sat beside her, his own mind replaying the chaotic events, the shattering of the mirror, the flood of memories. Solara's vacant eyes. He thought of Lyra, her stolen essence now free, dissipated. There was no closure, only absence. A profound weariness settled over him. Alara stirred hours later, groaning. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking in the dim light. She saw Kalen's silhouette and flinched momentarily before recognition dawned. Kalen? The mirror? Solara? Gone, he said, his voice rough. Destroyed, Solara. Emptied. Vorlog broken. Thorn is scrambling. Alara pushed herself up weakly, wincing. She touched her nose, then looked at her blood-stained tunic. Did I? You saved me, Kalen said simply. Your dissonance. It disrupted everything at the critical moment. It shattered the mirror's control. He didn't elaborate on the psychic flood. She looked fragile enough. The circle is broken. Relief washed over Alara's face, followed by a wave of dizziness. She leaned back against the crates. Broken, but not gone. Thorn is still here. The knowledge, the temptation. Others might try to rebuild it. Kaelin nodded grimly. The rot went deep, but the source is gone. The fear is visible. That's a start. He looked at her, really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the pallor, the way her hands trembled slightly. How do you feel? Like shattered glass, she admitted with a weak attempt at a smile. Held together with spit and willpower. My magic, it feels quiet, drained, but still there, still fractured. She flexed her fingers. No sparks, just a deep, bone-deep ache. That power you channeled, it wasn't just yours, Kaelin said quietly. It was the echo of everything happening below. You resonated with the chaos. It nearly tore you apart. It worked, Alara whispered, closing her eyes. She remembered the torrent of feeling, the desperate push. Tellen, Lyra, it worked. A tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. Not just from exhaustion, but from the shared horror, the cost. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound their breathing and the distant muffled sounds of the waking archive above, sounds that now carried a different timbre, a tension born of uncertainty. What now? Alara finally asked, opening her eyes. They held a new depth, a weariness tempered by the knowledge of what she had survived, what she had helped destroy. Now, Kaelin said, we ensure the rot doesn't regrow. Thorn will try to cover this up, blame intruders, an accident. We have proof, the journal, our testimony, and the broken remnants below. They'll never believe me, Alara said bitterly. The Glass Witch. They might not believe you, Kaelin conceded, but they might believe me, and they'll believe the evidence in the subchamber. Solara's state, Vorlag's babbling, the damaged starwell, the absence of the mirror. He stood, offering her a hand. But we need to move. This hiding place won't last, and you need proper rest somewhere safe. Alara took his hand. It was strong, calloused. She pulled herself up, swaying slightly. Where? Kaelin's gaze was steady. Outside, beyond the archive walls. There are people who need to know what happened here. People who lost loved ones. People who can help ensure this never happens again. He looked around the cavernous, forgotten storage room. This place, it hoarded knowledge, but it also hoarded lies. It's time to set some truths free. Alara looked towards the distant stairs leading up. The great archive of Athelgard no longer felt like a prison, but it wasn't home. It was a place of shattered illusions. She thought of the stolen memories, now free but lost. She thought of her own fractured magic, a constant reminder of cost. And she thought of Kaelin, his grief, his resolve. She nodded, a flicker of her own determination returning. Okay, she said, her voice still weak but clear. Let's go tell the story. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger from Thorn's remnants and the city's likely disbelief, but it was a path out of the suffocating silence. They had shattered the mirror. Now they had to face the reflections of its destruction in the world above. Together, the Shadow and the Glass Witch, they stepped out of the darkness, carrying the weight of stolen memories and the fragile hope of a city that might finally remember the price of its false stability. Chapter 8. Facing the Fractured Light. Emerging from the archive's underbelly felt like surfacing from a drowning depth. The city air of Athelgard, usually tinged with coal smoke and the damp river scent, felt startlingly clean, almost harsh. Dawn painted the soaring spires and grand marble facades in hues of rose and gold, a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom they'd left behind. Kaelin guided Alara through winding, less-traveled streets, avoiding the grand boulevards near the council spire and the archive's main gates. He moved with purpose, heading towards the Warrens, a district of tightly packed buildings, narrow alleys, and a populace used to keeping its head down. This was where information flowed like underground rivers, and where distrust of the ruling magisters ran deep. Alara moved slowly, leaning on Kaelin more than she wanted to admit. Every step sent jolts of fatigue through her. Her magic felt like a dormant ember, deeply buried, but the ache of its recent violent awakening lingered in her bones. The sights and sounds of the waking city were overwhelming after the archive's hushed corridors. The clatter of carts, the cries of street vendors, the sheer life of it felt alien, almost abrasive. They reached a nondescript door tucked beneath the shadow of a leaning tenement. Kaelin rapped a complex rhythm. After a moment, a slot slid open, revealing a pair of wary eyes. Recognition flickered, and the door unbolted, opening to reveal a cramped, warm room smelling of herbs, pipe smoke, and old paper. An elderly woman with sharp eyes and hair like spun silver stood there, her gaze instantly assessing both of them. "Kaelin," she said, her voice raspy but strong, "you look like death warmed over, and you brought—" Her sharp eyes narrowed on Alara. "The Archive's little storm cloud? The Glass Witch?" There was no malice in the title, only keen observation. "Master Alara Vanya," Tam, guiding Alara inside. "Alara Tamara Thornwood, keeper of more truths than the Archive ever dreamed of." Tamara snorted. "Flatterer. Sit the girl down before she falls down." She gestured to a worn armchair by a crackling hearth. "Tea. Strong. With honey. And explanations, Kaelin. The city's buzzing like a kicked hive. Word is something broke in the Starwell last night." While Tamara bustled with a kettle, Kaelin spoke. He kept it concise. "The journal. The ritual, the mirror, Solara and Vorlag's roles, the theft of memories, the destruction of the mirror, Solara's hollowing, Vorlag's broken state. He mentioned Alara's crucial role, her finding the journal, her resonance, her final desperate act that tipped the scales, without delving into the painful details of her magic or the psychic storm. Alara sat silently, sipping the hot, sweet tea Tamara pressed into her hands, its warmth a small comfort. Tamara listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. When Kaelin finished, she sat heavily in her own chair, staring into the fire. "Soul-sucking leeches," she muttered finally, "using the city's shield as a cover for their feast. Solara always thought her serenity was a mask, but this—" She shook her head. "And Lyra, I'm sorry, lad, truly." Kaelin nodded, the grief a familiar ache. "We need to spread this. Thorn will be crafting his own narrative, blaming outsiders, rogue magic, and accident. He'll try to seal the subchamber, silence Vorlag, discredit anyone who speaks out." "Discredit?" Tamara scoffed, looking pointedly at Alara, who flinched. "They'll crucify the Glass Witch if she steps forward publicly." "I know," Kaelin said. "That's why we need you, Tam, your network, the Whispers. Start with the families, those who lost loved ones to disappearances or sudden, unexplained emptiness. The merchant Tellin. His caravan crew is likely still in the city, confused and angry. Sow the seeds of doubt. Let people know what was stolen, not just who." Tamara stroked her chin. "Aye. Grief and anger are potent fertilizers for truth. We can get the story out piece by piece, source by source. Make it too big for Thorn to contain with simple denials." She looked at Alara. "And you, child, what of your unique situation?" Alara met her gaze. "It's quiet now, but it's still broken. I don't know if it will always be." She looked down at her hands, no longer sparking, but still feeling fundamentally flawed. "The mirror, it showed me the cost. Magic shouldn't be fueled by stolen lives. Maybe being broken isn't the worst thing." Tamara's expression softened slightly. "Broken things can still cut deep, child, and sometimes the cracks let in the light." She stood. "Rest here, both of you. I have whispers to plant." She moved with surprising speed for her age, grabbing a worn shawl and vanishing out the door into the warrens. The following days were a strange limbo. Alara slept, deep and dreamless, her body recovering from the immense strain. Kaelin came and went, bringing snippets of news gathered by Tamara's network. The whispers were spreading. Tellin's crew, frantic over their leader's vacant state, had heard rumors of memory theft. Families who had lost scholars under mysterious circumstances began comparing notes, finding disturbing patterns. The official story from the Archive, delivered by a visibly strained Magister Thorn, spoke of a contained arcane surge and an ongoing investigation, blaming external agitators. It rang hollow against the growing undercurrent of suspicion. Thorn struck back. Guards questioned keepers, particularly those who worked near the Starwell. Alara's name surfaced. Accusations flew. Unsupervised handling of volatile texts, negligent magic, being a destabilizing influence. The official line painted her as a likely catalyst for the surge, her unstable magic finally causing catastrophic damage. A warrant was quietly issued for her apprehension. Kaelin brought the news to the safe house, his face grim. Thorn's trying to make you the scapegoat. He needs to explain the damage. Solara's disappearance, Vorlag's state, blaming the Glass Witch fits his narrative perfectly. Alara felt a cold dread, but also a flicker of defiance. She'd faced the void of the mirror. Thorn's lies seemed smaller, sharper. So what do we do? Hide forever? No, Kaelin said, a plan forming in his eyes. We force a confrontation, on our terms. Thorn is powerful, but he's isolated now. Vorlag is babbling incoherently in the Archive's infirmary. Solara is gone. The circle is shattered, and the city is listening. How? We give them proof they can't ignore, Kaelin stated. Thorn sealed the Starwell in the subchamber, but he can't seal Vorlag's mouth forever, especially not if others hear him. And he can't erase the damage to the mosaic or the absence of the mirror. We need witnesses. Credible voices. Credible voices don't listen to Keepers of the Quill, Alara said bitterly. They listen to grief, Kaelin countered. They listen to outrage, and they might listen to someone who can show them the resonance of what happened. He looked at her intently. Your magic. It's quiet, but can you still feel it? The echoes? Alara closed her eyes, reaching inward. The deep exhaustion was still there, but beneath it, yes, the ember still glowed, and the resonances she'd imprinted, celebration, knowledge, love, resilience, grief, were faint but present, scars on her magical awareness. She also felt the chilling void of the mirror's absence, the discord of its destruction. Yes, she whispered, faintly. You projected it before through chaos, Kaelin said. Can you channel it? Not violently, but visibly? Let others feel the echo of what was stolen, what was destroyed. Not the memories themselves, but the signature? The violation? Alara frowned. It was a terrifying thought. Her magic was unpredictable. Projecting it deliberately, even weakly, risked losing control, confirming Thorn's narrative of her being a dangerous loose cannon. But the alternative was hiding, letting Thorn rewrite history. She thought of Talon's emptiness, of the fragmented joy and grief she'd felt erupting from the mirror. The city needed to feel that violation, however faintly, to understand. I can try, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. But I need to be close. To the Starwell, to the source. Kaelin nodded. Then that's where we go. We walk through the front gates. We demand an audience. And we let the echoes speak. It was a gamble, a huge one. They could be arrested on sight. Thorn could silence them permanently. Alara's magic could spiral out of control, causing more damage, but doing nothing meant letting the lie fester. The weight of the stolen memories, the echo of the mirror's shattering, demanded a voice. Alara Vanya, the fractured keeper, would have to become the conduit. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. The silence was over. It was time to face the fractured light. Chapter 9, The Keeper's Truth. The main gates of the great archive of Ethelgard loomed before them, imposing structures of enchanted bronze and stone, guarded by stern-faced sentinels in polished armor. The usual scholarly bustle was subdued, replaced by an air of watchful tension. More guards were visible than usual, their eyes scanning the sparse crowd with suspicion. Alara walked beside Kaelin, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wore clean, simple clothes Tam had procured, but she felt exposed, naked. Her magic lay dormant but uneasy beneath her skin, a sleeping serpent. The warrant for her arrest hung unspoken in the air. Kaelin moved with deliberate calm, his hand resting lightly near the hilt of his blade, his gray eyes alert. As they approached the gate, the lead sentinel stepped forward, hand raised. Halt! State your business! His gaze flickered over Alara, recognition dawning. His hand tightened on his spear haft. We seek an audience with the acting archivist, Kaelin stated, his voice carrying clearly. Regarding the events in the Starwell and the disappearance of Archivist Prime Solara, the sentinel's eyes narrowed. Magister Thorn is occupied, and you, Keeper Vanya, are wanted for questioning regarding the arcane surge. You will come with us. He gestured to two other guards. Alara felt panic rise, but Kaelin remained unmoved. We come willingly to provide testimony that concerns the theft of memories from the citizens of Ethelgard by the Circle of Sapphiron, led by Solara, Vorlag, and Thorn. His words, spoken loudly and clearly, cut through the tense air. A few passers-by stopped, their curiosity piqued. Whispers began immediately. Circle of Sapphiron? Theft of memories? Thorn? The sentinel flushed. Treasonous lies! Seize them! As the guards moved forward, Kaelin didn't draw his blade. Instead, he raised his voice further, addressing the growing crowd. People of Athelgard, how many have vanished? How many returned hollow? The archive harvests your memories, your joys, your sorrows, your very lives, stolen to fuel their power. Tellin, the caravan master, is their latest victim. Ask his crew, ask the families of the lost scholars. The guards grabbed Kaelin's arms. Another reached for Alara. This was it. The moment. She closed her eyes, shutting out the grasping hands, the angry sentinel, the murmuring crowd. She reached deep within, past the fear, past the fatigue, to the quiet ember of her fractured magic. She sought the resonances imprinted on her soul: celebration, defiant anger, knowledge, burning need, love, protective fury, resilience, stubborn strength, grief, crushing sorrow. And she sought the chilling void left by the mirror's destruction. She didn't push it out violently. She didn't try to control it. She focused it, like concentrating sunlight through a lens, not to burn, but to illuminate. She channeled the echoes, the dissonant symphony of violation and loss, and pushed it outwards, not as a wave of force, but as a field of raw, emotional resonance. It washed out from her, a silent ripple in the ether. There was no visible light, no crackling energy. But the effect was immediate and profound. The guard reaching for her froze, his hand inches from her arm. His eyes widened, not with anger, but with sudden, inexplicable sorrow, a fleeting glimpse of a personal loss long buried. The sentinel commanding them gasped, staggering back a step, his face contorting with a flash of profound, unidentifiable grief. People in the crowd clutched their chests or heads. A woman cried out softly, remembering a forgotten childhood fear. A man flinched as if struck. Overwhelmed by a surge of misplaced joy, turned sour. It wasn't the memories themselves. It was the essence of the violation, the discordant echo of lives ripped apart. It was the feeling of the mirror's void, the crushing weight of stolen moments. It lasted only a heartbeat, a fleeting, overwhelming wave of shared collective anguish that had no single source, yet resonated with a terrifying universality. Then it was gone. Alara swayed, drained, a fresh trickle of blood at her nose. The silence that followed was absolute, stunned. The guards stood frozen, their aggression replaced by confusion and a dawning horror. The crowd stared at Alara, not with fear of the Glass Witch, but with awe and a deep, unsettling recognition. What was that? The lead sentinel whispered, his voice hoarse. The echo, Alara said, her voice trembling but clear. She wiped the blood away. The echo of what the circle stole, what the mirror consumed, what we destroyed. She looked past him towards the archive's grand facade. Magister Thorn hides the truth below. He imprisons Vorlag, who babbles of mirrors and harvests. He sealed the chamber where Solara sits, emptied by her own device. The stability you cherish was bought with your stolen souls. The crowd murmured, the whispers no longer just curiosity, but outrage, fear, and a desperate need for answers. The sentinel looked from Alara to the crowd, his authority crumbling. He lowered his spear slightly. At that moment, a commotion came from within the archive gates. Magister Thorn emerged, flanked by more guards, his face a mask of fury barely concealing panic. What is the meaning of this rabble? Seize those traitors! Silence them! But the guards hesitated. The crowd didn't disperse. It pressed closer, voices rising. Where is Archivist Prime Solara? What happened to Tellin? What is the Circle of Saphiron? Show us the subchamber! Thorn's eyes darted to Alara, pure venom in his gaze. That creature is a danger! Her unstable magic caused the surge. She spews lies to cover her recklessness. Then let us see Magister Thorn, a new voice boomed. An elderly man dressed in the robes of a master cartographer pushed through the crowd. He was respected, known for his missing granddaughter, a promising linguist. Let us see this surge damage. Let us see Vorlag. Let us hear his babbling, as the girl says. If there is nothing to hide, transparency is the cure for these whispers. Others joined him. Merchants, minor scholars, craftsmen, people whose lives had been touched by unexplained losses. The demand became a roar. Open the Starwell! Show us the truth! Thorn stood isolated before the rising tide of anger and suspicion. His guards looked uncertain, their loyalty wavering. He saw Kaelin, standing protectively near Alara, a figure of grim resolve. He saw the blood on Alara's face, the haunted depth in her eyes that spoke of witnessed horrors. He saw the crowd, no longer cowed by the archive's authority. His shoulders slumped, just fractionally. The facade cracked. "Very well," he spat, the words tasting like ash. "You wish to see? Come. See the damage wrought by instability and treason." It was a last, desperate attempt to control the narrative, but the defeat in his eyes was evident. The dam had broken. The crowd, led by the master cartographer and flanked by the now neutral guards, surged forward through the gates, sweeping Kaelin and Alara along with them. They marched through the grand halls past stunned scholars and keepers, towards the sealed doors of the Starwell chamber. Alara leaned on Kaelin, exhausted but alive with a fragile hope. She had faced the void, channeled the echoes, and shattered the silence. The truth, however painful, was flooding the halls of the Great Archive. The keepers of stolen memories were about to be held accountable by the very voices they had tried to erase. Chapter 10. The Weight of Remembering. The Starwell chamber felt smaller with the crowd packed inside, their murmurs a low hum against the damaged mosaic. The chaotic energy burns from Alara's projection and the mirror's death throes were starkly visible. Jagged, darkened scars marring the once pristine celestial map. The air still held a faint tang of ozone and psychic residue. Magister Thorn stood near the center, trying to project authority, but he looked diminished, cornered. He gestured angrily at the damage. "See, the result of uncontrolled power! The Glass Witch is doing! A catastrophic surge!" The master cartographer, Eamon, stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. "And the shaft, Magister Thorn? The subchamber mentioned in the whispers?" Thorn's jaw tightened. "A secure repository! Damaged and unstable due to the surge! Sealed for safety!" "Safety from what?" A woman in the crowd shouted. Tellan, second in command, her face etched with worry and anger. "Where is Master Tellan? They say he's here!" "Changed!" Thorn hesitated. A fatal mistake. Before he could formulate a response, a commotion erupted near the infirmary wing entrance. Two harassed-looking healers were trying to restrain a large, stumbling figure. Vorlag. His robes were disheveled, his eyes wild and unfocused, rolling in his head. He mumbled incessantly, fragments spilling out. Shining dark, takes the pictures, the stories. Lyra laughed, then gone. Silverbark warmth, cold, so cold, harvest, needs the sweet ones. The strong grief, Solara, empty, mirror cracked. He caught sight of the damaged mosaic and let out a keening wail. "Broken! All broken!" Collapsed to his knees, sobbing incoherently. The crowd stared in horrified silence. This wasn't the formidable Magister Vorlag. This was a broken shell, babbling about mirrors, harvests, and stolen stories. His words, fragmented but terrifyingly clear in their implication, were more damning than any testimony. Thorn's face went pale. "He is unwell! Delusional from the surge!" "Open the subchamber, Thorn," Eamon demanded, his voice like iron. "Now, or we will." Trapped, exposed, Thorn looked from the broken Vorlog to the angry crowd to the resolute faces of Eamon and the other leaders. He saw Kaelin, watchful and dangerous, standing protectively near Alara, who looked frail but whose eyes held the unwavering certainty of someone who had seen the abyss. Defeated, he gestured curtly to a senior guard. "Open it." The grinding sound of the displaced mosaic slab echoed in the chamber. The dark shaft yawned open. A wave of that chilling emptiness mixed with the lingering scent of ozone and something faintly like dust wafted up. A delegation descended. Amon, a few other respected citizens, Kaelin, and Alara, supported by him. Thorn followed, his steps heavy. The circular chamber was as Kaelin had left it, polished black stone, the obsidian plinth bearing only a dark smudge and violet ash. And in the corner, sitting slumped against the wall, sat Archivist Prime Solara. Her eyes were open, staring blankly ahead, seeing nothing. Her face was devoid of expression, her posture limp. She didn't react to their presence, to the light, to Vorlog's sobbing echoing down the shaft. She was a perfect, terrifying void. Gasps echoed in the confined space. Eamon approached Solara slowly, waving a hand before her eyes. No reaction. He touched her shoulder gently. She didn't flinch. "By the ether," he breathed, horror dawning on his face. "She's empty." "The mirror," Alara said softly, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. Everyone turned to her. "The mirror of Mnemosyne. It stood here." She pointed to the plinth. "They used it to steal memories, to siphon lives, to fuel their power. We destroyed it! The backlash!" It took what was left of her. She looked at Solara's vacant form. No triumph in her eyes, only a profound sorrow. "This is the cost of stolen memories. This is the emptiness they traded for power. The evidence was undeniable. The broken Vorlog babbling of harvests, the hollow Archivist Prime, the damaged Starwell resonating with the aftermath of violence, the sealed chamber, the absence of any other explanation, and Alara's haunting projection at the gate, the echo of the violation itself. They emerged back into the Starwell. The crowd fell silent as Eamon addressed them, his voice heavy with grim certainty. He relayed what they had seen. He spoke of the Circle of Sapphiron, the mirror, the theft of memories, the destruction, and the hollow fate of its leaders. He pointed to Vorlog, now sedated but broken, and spoke of Solara's terrifying emptiness below. He didn't call Alara a hero. He called her a witness, the one whose unique sensitivity had uncovered and helped end the atrocity. The silence that followed was profound. Then it wasn't silence. It was the sound of grief unleashed. Cries rose for lost loved ones. Scholars, merchants, artists. Anger surged, directed at Thorn, who stood isolated, his face ashen. The illusion of stability maintained by stolen lives lay shattered. Thorn was taken into custody by the city guard, not the archive sentinels, on charges of conspiracy, accessory to grievous magical harm, and abuse of authority. Vorlag was moved to a secure hospice. Solara remained below, a silent, chilling monument to the Circle's ambition, guarded but untouched. The days that followed were tumultuous. The Great Archive was placed under the temporary stewardship of a council of senior magisters not implicated in the Circle, with Eamon and other citizen representatives overseeing a commission of inquiry. The subchamber was meticulously documented, its dark purpose exposed. Stories poured out, families sharing their losses, scholars revealing strange gaps in their recollections or unsettling encounters with the Circle members. The city began the long, painful process of acknowledging what had been stolen. Alara and Kaelin stood before the Citizens' Commission. Alara told her story. Finding the journal, witnessing the ritual, feeling the resonances, the final confrontation. She spoke plainly of her fractured magic, not as a source of pride, but as the flaw that made her attuned to the Archive's hidden dissonance. Kaelin spoke of Lyra, his search, his role. Their testimonies, backed by the physical evidence and Vorlog's fragmented ramblings, became the bedrock of the truth. There was no grand pardon for Alara. The label Glass Witch didn't vanish overnight. Some still blamed her unstable magic for the damage. But the venom was gone, replaced by a wary respect, even sympathy. She was offered a position within the Reformed Archive, a role utilizing her unique sensitivity to help identify any lingering traces of forbidden magic or hidden artifacts. She declined. Standing on a bridge overlooking the river that wound through Aethelgard, Alara watched the city bustle below. The scars were still fresh, the grief palpable, but there was a new energy too, a determination to rebuild on truth, however painful. Kaelin stood beside her, gazing at the horizon. "You're sure?" he asked. "They could use your help. Your sight." Alara shook her head. "My sight saw the rot because I was broken, but I need to learn what my magic is without the Archive's shadow, without the weight of its secrets." She touched the communication stone, now cool and inert in her pocket, a memento. "The city needs to remember, Kaelin, but I need to learn how to live. Maybe somewhere quieter, where glass can just be glass sometimes." Kaelin nodded. He looked towards the distant Silverbark forest. "I need to take Lyra home. What remains of her, in memory?" He offered her a small, worn leather pouch. "Tam sent this. Enough for passage and a new start, wherever you choose." Alara took the pouch, feeling its weight. Not just coin, but trust. Freedom. "Thank you, Kaelin, for everything." He placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. "The cracks let in the light, Alara. Remember that." He gave her a final nod, then turned and walked away, a solitary figure carrying his own burden of grief and resolution. Alara watched him go, then turned back to the city. The Great Archive loomed in the distance, no longer a prison of silence, but a place holding a dark chapter in its history. She touched her nose, dry now. Her magic lay quiet within her, still fractured, still unpredictable, but hers alone. It wasn't a curse or a weapon, it was a part of her, a lens through which she saw the world differently. She took a deep breath of the free air. The path ahead was unknown, unwritten. It might hold danger, loneliness, or unexpected joys. But it was her path. No longer the keeper of the quill, no longer the Glass Witch, just Alara Vanya, carrying the echo of shattered glass and the fragile, hard-won weight of remembering. She turned her back on the archive and walked towards the bustling docks, ready to find out what lay beyond the next page. The story of Ethelgard's stolen memories was recorded. Her own story was just beginning.